Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll dive into who Joe Black is. One of the most fascinating, mysterious, and enigmatic characters or entities ever portrayed on the big screen is Joe Black, the personification of death in Meet Joe Black. Through his appearance, we're not only confronted with the inevitable reality of our fate, but also invited to explore the complexity of what it means to be human. In this film, death takes human form, walks among us, and challenges us to question our perception of life, love, and sacrifice. Throughout this story, Joe Black takes us on a journey of reflection, not just about the end of existence, but about what makes life worth living. That's why, in this video, we're exploring the fascinating figure of Joe Black, his origin, personality, and behavior, as well as his incredible abilities and known weaknesses. The story begins by introducing us to Bill Parrish, a successful man and owner of a business empire, preparing to celebrate his 65th birthday. From the outset, we see that he is a thoughtful man, at peace with many aspects of his life, although not free from familial and professional tensions. However, his life takes an unexpected turn when he begins to hear a mysterious voice and feel an unusual presence. That presence turns out to be death, presenting itself in human form as Joe Black, an intriguing and enigmatic young man. Joe proposes a deal to Bill. He'll give him a few more days of life in exchange for letting him experience life from a human perspective. This agreement sets the stage for an unusual relationship, where Bill becomes Joe's guide, showing him the wonders and complexities of earthly existence. As Joe explores the human experience, he begins to discover the intensity of human emotions, especially through Susan, Bill's daughter. From the moment Joe and Susan meet, there is a special connection. What starts as curiosity on Joe's part transforms into love, although his initial view is idealistic and almost possessive. Over time, Joe learns what it truly means to love. It's not just about what one feels, but about desiring the other person's happiness, even if it means letting them go. On the other hand, Bill embarks on his own emotional journey. Aware of his impending fate, he reflects on the decisions he's made, the legacy he's built, and the relationships he's fostered, particularly with his daughters. Through his interactions with Joe, Bill reaffirms his values, realizing that the most important things in life aren't material possessions, but the human connections we leave behind. The tension in the story rises when Bill uncovers a conspiracy within his company that could destroy everything he has built. This conflict serves as a reminder that life is a constant balance between external challenges and internal reflections. The film's emotional climax arrives when Bill accepts his destiny with dignity and serenity. In his final moments, he displays a profound peace, knowing he has lived fully, surrounded by love and meaning. Joe, in turn, understands the true purpose of his journey, to learn to appreciate life and, through his love for Susan, to realize that true love is neither possessive nor selfish. The farewell between Joe and Susan is painful yet significant. Joe chooses to fulfill his promise and take Bill, but not without leaving a valuable gift: the lesson that life gains meaning through the experiences, relationships, and love we share. The film ends with a sense of closure, not only for the characters, but also for the viewer, who is invited to reflect on their own life. Now that we've thoroughly covered Joe Black's story, I want to talk about his physical appearance, what we know about his personality and behavior, and explain his incredible abilities and known weaknesses. The character of Joe Black is quite enigmatic and has a philosophical approach to life and death. In the film, Joe Black is not just a mysterious man. He is death itself taking human form. At the beginning of the movie, Joe Black is distant, mysterious, and somewhat inaccessible. As death, he lacks a clear human identity and behaves more like an impartial cosmic force. He does not understand the value of life or the emotional pain humans experience, as his existence transcends such earthly concerns. In his initial interactions, especially when he first meets Bill Parrish, Joe is straightforward and detached, showing no signs of empathy. Death, as embodied by Joe, is merely a duty to fulfill, an inevitable process unaffected by human emotions. At this stage, his personality seems almost unchangeable, as he sees himself as an observer, untouched by the joys or tragedies of life. What begins to change Joe's personality is his interaction with humans, particularly when he meets Susan, Bill's daughter. As he experiences the world of the living, Joe starts to develop a genuine curiosity about human emotions, something entirely foreign to him before. This marks the beginning of his internal transformation. At first, human emotions are a mystery to Joe. He doesn't understand concepts like love, sadness, or compassion. However, throughout the movie, he begins to experience these feelings through the people around him, profoundly affecting him. Joe starts to question life itself. Why do people fight so hard to hold on to it? What makes life worth living? Joe's interaction with Susan is especially pivotal to his personal development. Through her, Joe not only experiences love, but also confronts doubts and confusion about his role in the lives of humans. Even though he is death personified, he finds himself torn between his true nature and the human emotions he begins to feel. This inner conflict drives his evolution from a cold and calculating being to one who starts questioning himself and his purpose. Joe becomes increasingly vulnerable and emotional over time, making him more and more human. As the movie progresses, he faces ethical and emotional dilemmas, such as whether he should allow Susan to love him, knowing that he is not of this world, and that his presence in her life is marked by tragedy and sacrifice. Towards the end of the movie, Joe's personality reaches a deep sense of acceptance. Although he initially sees himself merely as an instrument of death, over the course of the story, he realizes that his role is not just to take the dead, but also to witness what the living do with their time. His interactions with Bill Parrish, who is also confronting his mortality, are pivotal. Joe comes to understand that his purpose is not only to fulfill an unchangeable destiny, but also to learn and, in doing so, to value human life from a new perspective. This acceptance of his nature not only makes him a more reflective and philosophical being, but also leads to a sort of reconciliation with his role, especially after Bill's death. Joe's decision to let Susan go and allow her to continue her life, though painful, demonstrates his detachment and emotional maturity. In a sense, Joe is no longer simply death. He has grown much like a human through his experiences. One of the most intriguing aspects of Joe's personality is the internal contradiction he faces. On one hand, he is death, inevitable, eternal, and devoid of emotion. On the other hand, he is a being deeply affected by human emotions. As he evolves, this contradiction leads him to a new understanding of his existence. Life and death are not separate, but intertwined, and it is precisely this interdependence that gives meaning to both. Joe Black's physical appearance in Meet Joe Black reflects both his nature as the personification of death and his gradual transition into a more human figure. At the beginning of the movie, Joe Black takes the form of an attractive and charismatic man, portrayed by Brad Pitt. This is no coincidence. Joe's physical attractiveness plays a significant role in how he interacts with humans. His appearance is designed to draw people in, even though his true identity is death. In this sense, his physicality reflects an external manifestation of his power and a way to gain the trust of humans without revealing his true nature. Joe possesses features that stand out for their symmetry and classic beauty, a defined jawline, piercing eyes, and an enigmatic gaze. These traits not only make him alluring, but also contribute to his intimidating and charismatic presence, generating a mixture of fascination and respect. He has dark, slightly tousled hair, which enhances the natural look of his appearance while maintaining an air of mystery. This detail adds to his somewhat ethereal aesthetic. He doesn't appear overly polished or superficial, but but rather like someone from another plane of existence. Joe Black's clothing is elegant yet understated, reflecting his formal and serious nature. Throughout the film, he is seen wearing dark, well-tailored suits that give him an air of authority and distinction. These suits not only make him look sophisticated, but also emphasize his authoritative presence. Joe is the personification of death, and his attire reinforces this image of power and control. For most of the movie, Joe wears suits in dark tones like black and gray, which reflect his connection to the darkness and mystery of death. These outfits contrast with the more colorful or casual attire of the human characters, underlining his role as an external figure to everyday life. Despite being death, his clothing is impeccably maintained and never shows signs of wear, highlighting his eternal nature. Joe Black's posture and body language are also integral to his physical appearance. Though he takes on a human form, his demeanor has a quality that is more reminiscent of a transcendent entity. His way of walking is calm and deliberate, unhurried, as if he has all the time in the world. Additionally, there is something in his gestures that suggests a lack of familiarity with human emotions. His movements are precise, but slightly stiff. He always seems to be in control of any situation and moves with a natural elegance. Joe's gaze is another key aspect of his physical appearance. His eyes are intense and profound, as though he is looking beyond the people around him to something they cannot comprehend. His gaze carries an air of wisdom and contemplation, but it is also deeply unsettling, as if he is acutely aware of life's fleeting nature. As the movie progresses, Joe's appearance, while still attractive and flawless, becomes more connected to humanity through his interactions with others. His face begins to reflect a range of human emotions as he delves into the complexity of what it means to be alive. Over time, his facial expressions and body language reveal increasing vulnerability. While he maintains a strong presence, his emerging human emotions become evident in his expressions and gestures. Joe's interaction with Susan, in particular, is reflected in his face. When Joe falls in love with her, his eyes and smile radiate warmth and humanity that were previously absent. This transformation is subtle yet powerful, showing that, despite being death, the human experience of loving and being loved begins to influence his physicality. Although Joe is clearly a human figure, his appearance at certain moments serves as a reminder of death's presence. His serene stillness, the way he communicates with humans, and the inherent darkness of his attire are constant reminders of his transcendent nature. In his face, there is always something detached, as though he is observing life from an outside perspective, a quality that never fully disappears, even as he displays human emotions. Joe Black's skills and weaknesses are heavily influenced by his nature as the personification of death. Throughout Meet Joe Black, these aspects are revealed and evolve, adding complex layers to his character. Joe's most evident skill is his immortality. As death itself, he is not subject to the laws of life and death as humans are. He does not age, cannot be harmed, and is physically invulnerable. This makes him an intimidating presence, highlighting his role as the entity that brings an end to all lives. Throughout the movie, Joe appears to have a special sensitivity to human thoughts and emotions. While not explicitly portrayed as having telepathic powers, he possesses great intuition and can sense the emotions and thoughts of those around him. This allows him to understand, albeit in a limited way, what people feel, a curious element given that, as death, he is originally detached from such emotions. As death, Joe has a tacit control over time and the events of life and death. He does not see himself as someone who directly intervenes in people's lives, but his presence can alter the natural flow of events. His arrival in the world of the living is tied to the existential paradox of bringing an end to a life while simultaneously creating the opportunity to experience life. As the personification of death, Joe has deep and intrinsic knowledge about life and death, though he initially does not understand it from an emotional perspective. Over the course of the film, this knowledge becomes increasingly valuable, enabling him to better grasp human motivations and the complexities of human existence. Although Joe initially comes across as a strange and unsettling figure, his presence has a magnetic force that draws people in. His calm yet enigmatic demeanor makes him an attractive figure, capable of maintaining control in situations without needing to impose his authority. His aura of mystery grants him a kind of supernatural charisma that allows him to navigate social situations easily, despite his lack of understanding of human emotions. One of Joe Black's main weaknesses is his lack of understanding of human emotions. While he possesses intellectual knowledge about life and death, he has no direct experience with what it means to feel love, sadness, fear, joy, or regret. This emotional void creates significant internal conflicts and makes it difficult for him to connect with others. For example, in his relationship with Susan, even though Joe begins to feel love for her, he cannot fully grasp the emotional consequences his presence will have on her life. This puts him in an uncomfortable position, as his decisions end up affecting people in ways far deeper than he anticipates. Although Joe has a transcendental immortality, his influence over human life is limited by his own lack of lived experience. He cannot create life, nor can he directly interfere with the decisions that humans make. Despite his immense power over death, his inability to interact deeply with living beings makes him an incomplete figure, an observer rather than a participant. As Joe begins to experience human emotions, especially through his relationship with Susan, he becomes emotionally vulnerable. His connection with her makes him feel, which goes against his nature as an entity that observes without becoming involved. This vulnerability puts him in a position of conflict. On one hand, he must fulfill his role as death, but on the other, he becomes trapped by the emotions he begins to understand. For example, when Joe realizes that he cannot be with Susan without causing suffering, his love and sense of duty intertwine, leading him to make difficult decisions. Although Joe has a deep understanding of death, this dependence on his role as death itself is also a weakness. He feels bound to his universal purpose, to usher people into the afterlife. Despite the humanity he begins to experience, he cannot completely escape his role. In this sense, he is a prisoner of his primordial function, which prevents him from having his own life or finding true personal meaning outside of death. Despite his efforts to understand what it is to be human, he will never truly be human. Throughout the movie, Joe realizes that no matter how much he tries, he will always be a figure alien to human experiences. This impossibility of fully experiencing life depresses and isolates him, as even though he wants to understand human emotions and experiences, he will always be limited by his impersonal and immutable nature. The character of Joe Black is a modern reinterpretation of the personification of death, a philosophical and literary concept that has existed throughout history. In the film, Joe becomes a character who not only fulfills his role as death, but begins to experience what it means to live, adding a human and emotional layer to the concept of death itself. On the other hand, Meet Joe Black was born from the idea of exploring the existential dilemmas of life and death, using a mysterious and philosophical character to provoke reflection on what it means to live and die. Through an introspective script, an impressive cast, and sensitive direction, the film became a work that, while controversial for some, remains a reflection on the meaning of life and how people value their time in the world. And this is all we know so far about the cosmic and millennial entity known as Joe Black. The character truly caught my attention, not only because he is death itself, but also because, even while standing next to Bill, he continued doing his work as death, explaining that he was just a small part of a greater being, causing great astonishment in our own understanding of this entity and its vast reach in the world. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you already know about Joe Black? Do you think he was truly death, or maybe some other cosmic entity? And finally, if something like this happened to you, what would you do with the time you have left? Share your answers to these questions and your general opinion about Joe Black. As always, Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, share it to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos.